Welcome to the Grow People podcast with Pastor Jason.
Hello, everybody.
Lead
pastor. That was hot. That was.
He's so excited to be here today. Lead pastor, Revolution Church. My name's David Stein. I'm the campus pastor at our Canton location. Purpose of the Grow People podcast is to help
grow people.
Grow people. There you go.
Sorry, I didn't, if you were waiting on me or you were like doing a dramatic pause.
It was a fill in the blank quiz. Speaking of quiz, we thought it would be fun to surprise Pastor Jason with a little Christmas quiz. You know, what would it be in Christmas and all?
We did Christmas and all. Yeah.
So these are quizzes. These are 5 questions. You have sworn an affidavit that you have not seen the questions.
I have not.
You have not seen the answers.
I have not.
Okay.
Are these right or wrong, subjective?
No, there's an actual answer to
okay.
these.
All right.
Okay. Now, if you're watching the podcast, you have on the bottom of your screen a little tally board. No, you don't. You don't have that, and you can
tally board.
I don't even know what a tally board is.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either. I always just assume that whatever you say was something that was true back in the 70s or 80s.
Everything was true back in the 70s and 80s.
Well, I'm saying like you could say it, and
I know,
and I would be like, well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I wasn't around.
I don't remember.
Yeah, what did you drop in the message on Sunday? Oh, this happened in 1972. I wasn't born yet.
Yeah,
you old people in the crowd, you were born.
I said some of you were alive during that time. Well, actually, on the Thursday night, I said 1962.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, and this is part of what happens, afterwards, you lovingly, in your way, came up and you were like, what year was that? And you were like, what Apollo mission was that? And I was like, you talking through, and you're like, well, this one was in 68. And you're like, I think that was in, and then I looked it up. I'm like, oh yeah, it was 1972. When you could have just come up and said, hey, that wasn't 62, it was 72.
I don't want to be that guy.
I mean, I appreciate it. Though. I appreciate it.
But I was alive in 62 also. So it could have gone either way.
Well, that's how you knew.
Well, the reason I knew that stuff is, growing up, if you did grow up in the 60s, the Apollo missions, that was the end all be all. I remember where I was when Apollo 11 launched. It launched on July 16th. We didn't land on the moon until a few days later.
Yeah. And was that in 68 when that was?
1969.
69. Yeah.
Yep. JFK said in 1961, we will land a man on the moon and bring him safely home to Earth.
In the end of this decade.
But there are those who say we didn't.
Yeah.
I was actually sitting next to a guy at an event who believed that we didn't.
Really?
Yeah.
Those things are always, I'm not making fun of people. I don't mean to do that. But the people who get into the conspiracy theories like that, that's why I'm always like, what I always think about it is, what is it? I mean, you say we didn't, why? Like, why are you spending so much of your life trying to prove that we didn't go to the moon? What's the purpose in that?
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously I believe we did. Right. Just like I believe the world is round and not flat, but it just people like that are intriguing to me is what I'm saying is like, that's the mission of their life to prove that point. And all I'm trying to say is whether you believe it's true or not, get a better mission in your life than trying to prove that conspiracy theory.
Well, the picture of the blue marble that you showed in the message on Sunday looks pretty round to me.
Looks pretty round to me. Yeah.
Like a perfect circle. Who knew? All right, let's get to the quiz. Let's get to the Christmas quiz. You're listening to the Grow People podcast. Okay, first question. If you don't get this, we will just stop the podcast and we'll move on to the next episode.
No pressure.
Okay. This Frank Capra movie is your all-time favorite movie.
Frank Capra?
Capra. Frank Capra. He was the director.
Oh, okay.
He directed this movie. You have mentioned it many times last week.
I have.
In a sermon.
Well, you said my favorite movie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not your favorite movie. Your favorite Christmas movie of all time.
Yes. Okay, let
me qualify that.
Let's clarify. Okay. Well, that's why you were confusing me.
Okay.
So I'm like, if I get wrong my own answer about what is my favorite, then what does this say about me?
This is your favorite Christmas movie.
Yes, It's a Wonderful Life.
Okay.
Yes.
And you made mention that those who have not seen It's a Wonderful Life are heathens.
Yeah, I don't know what I said.
I don't know.
Sometimes I say things, and I
don't think you said heathens, but
I probably said something worse.
I was conviced.
Were you?
I've only seen bits and pieces.
What?
Yeah, I know.
It's really more of a shock than anything.
Uh-huh.
Because when however you grow up and whatever your life is normal, it's weird to hear that somebody else's life isn't that same normal.
My life was not Christmas movies.
Okay.
Now we watched Charlie Brown Christmas special.
Of course.
Yeah,
yes.
we did that. Rudolph. We did that. But prior to conversion, I saw The Godfather over 100 times. And then when I hear somebody who's not seen The Godfather, I'm shocked.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like when something is so culturally iconic,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to believe that people haven't. And Christmas, like around Christmas time, It's a Wonderful Life, Christmas Vacation,
Mm-hmm.
those movies play all the time. And so it amazes me that people haven't seen them, especially one, like an old black and white movie like that has kind of just been timeless.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No, you're 1 for 1.
Thank you.
Okay.
Now that I understood correctly the question.
Number two, this Irving Berlin movie included the Academy Award-winning song "White Christmas" by Bing Crosby.
These are
It's a tough question.
Well, who was the person that you said?
Irving Berlin. He wrote "White Christmas."
Okay.
So
wrote the song?
He wrote the song.
Okay.
Yeah. So what movie did that debut in?
White Christmas. Yeah, these feel like very cerebral questions. I was thinking
how many reindeer were there?
Yeah, exactly. Who's the one with the red nose?
Well, the reason it's a trick question is because it was in White Christmas in 1954.
So obviously that's not the right answer.
That's not the right answer. This would be our favorite holiday movie. It's called Holiday Inn with Bing Crosby and Rosemary Clooney, George Clooney's mom.
That's the answer?
Yes, Holiday Inn. Well, you weren't going to get it. So
No. But I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
Ding. Where's the bell?
Where's the bell?
That was 1942. Number three.
I was not alive then either. Yeah.
Number 3. This should be easy. Okay. This hymn, written in 1710, was originally in Latin, "Veni, Veni, Emmanuel."
And these are Christmas questions? This is a Christmas quiz?
Yes. This hymn, this Christmas song,
mm-hmm.
written in 1710 in Latin, is "Veni, Veni, Emmanuel. Captivum salve Israel."
Mm. So Emmanuel? Is it Emmanuel?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, come Emmanuel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There you go. Okay. We're going to give you that one. You're 2 for 3. Have you ever heard of the Christmas truce from World War I?
Christmas truce?
The famous Christmas truce?
No.
Okay. We'll scratch that question.
I'm sure I might have in history.
Okay. This is 1914, Christmas 1914. British troops and German troops, they're in their foxholes.
Mm-hmm.
And they met in the no man's land between the foxholes.
Oh, yes. I have heard this.
Yes. Did you know there was a Christmas song that the German troops began to sing?
Yes.
That drew them out. Do you know what song that was?
No, but there was a movie about this.
There was.
Yes.
Yeah. It was Silent Night.
Silent Night. That's right. Yes.
Yep.
I didn't know if it was Holiday Inn.
I should have made these easier.
I'm just wondering who in the world, I mean, I know who, you, came up with these questions.
I did. And
now I know why you asked me if I wanted to know these questions prior to, because I needed time to appropriately look them up.
One more. Greatest Christmas movie of all time featured a villain worse than Scrooge. What was that character's name in the movie Die Hard?
Oh.
Played by the late Alan Rickman.
Yeah, Hans Gruber.
Hans Gruber.
Yes, I just watched this the other day. Yes. The greatest Christmas movie. See, that's the debate. Is it a Christmas movie?
I do believe it is.
Yeah.
But
it came out at Christmas.
Yeah. It has a Christmas motif.
It does.
Yeah. Christmas overtones and undertones.
Yeah, which is funny to me because it's set in L.A. Yeah. And so like when you think Christmas, you don't think L.A.
It is bizarre in Los Angeles to celebrate Christmas.
I would imagine.
It's palm trees, it's 85 degrees.
Yeah.
And then there's Christmas lights everywhere.
Yeah.
But there are places like Avalon, because they started places like Avalon.
Exactly. Yeah, like the Urban Spectrum and all that. Yeah.
Where you walk around and there's snow falling.
Yeah.
And it's 85 degrees. So,
see, I love Die Hard. It is, but I would personally would not call it a Christmas movie, which is, I know, highly controversial.
It is.
And I probably just lost a lot of fans. So I love the movie, but yeah, it happens at Christmas.
I don't even want to get into that controversy. There's plenty of other controversies to get into.
There is.
Okay, so there's the Christmas quiz. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you were yelling at your portable device, or you're in the car listening to the podcast and you're yelling out the answers, good for you. There is no prize. Coming up on
I would like to know if anybody knew the answer for the Holiday Inn, though.
Oh, I would hope. Leanna knew it. Leanna, because we watch it every year.
Yeah, but would she have known it if she didn't know you?
Yes. She turned me on to that movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. She's an old soul.
Well, that is true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Coming up on the next podcast, not this one, but the next one, we will be talking about Sabbathing and lamenting and getting through the holidays when there's just an overwhelming sense of just the last 2 years, the overwhelming sense of grief. But on today's podcast, we're going to look at where we've been and where we are going to go as a church. At the time of this recording, it has been 635 days since I counted, since the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, wow.
And a lot has happened since then. A lot has happened since 14 days to flatten the curve, all the way to get this shot and lose your job and everything in between.
Yeah.
So we've had an incredibly divisive couple of years in our country with regard to politics and race. And as we sit here today, I want to start out by saying thank you for leading this church through the last 12 years, but also the last 2. And leading through a crisis is never easy, but leading through a crisis, you learn. So what have we learned, and what convictions do you have coming out of the last 22 months?
Yeah, and we've been talking about this some in at the church, and we've been having this conversation. But yeah, what you just said, I just love that. When you go through crisis, you learn, and I think the greatest crisis of any crisis is if we don't learn, right? We go through crisis, and this has been a question that, theology and philosophers have dealt with for centuries, millennia, the problem of suffering. Although the Bible talks a lot about it, and how we suffer, and to, Romans 8, whether it's James, like how to consider suffering because of what it produces in us. So none of us would choose it for ourselves. And this last almost 2 years is no different. None of us would have chosen this. None of us would have, had this. What do you always, on the bingo board, what do you say? No one, don't you say that? Yeah.
Bingo?
Yeah, no one saw this on the. You say that phrase quite a bit. Don't look at me like I'm crazy.
No, I'm
who had this one on their 2020 bingo?
Who had this on their bingo card?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've
said that. Okay.
Okay.
I thought you were referencing that I'm old and I play bingo. Though I do love a game of bingo.
Hey, I would say it's not just an old person's game. We actually, in college, when I was this is complete detour now, we used to go play bingo every week. And that's when I learned about daubers and the whole deal. And that's a lot of fun. Like doing it, you just smell like smoke afterwards. But it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay, so now I'm not crazy. You were saying that.
I have said that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. As I normally say, I'm not normally wrong. So bingo. I just wanted to be. Where else could you get content like this? Anyway.
I was more of a Yahtzee fan.
More of a Yeah, Yahtzee's good too. Uno for me. So, but my point where I was going with that is none of us would have chosen this. No one would have seen this. And so we can look at the season that we've gone through, and any season in our life when there is suffering, we can look at that and just, and we'll talk about it next time, lamenting and how that's good, and But I think the best thing we can do is learn from it and grow from it. And so going through this season as individuals, as me as a Christian, as a dad, as a husband, as a pastor, I've thought about it on multiple levels. And so there's things about myself that I want to change, and then things about leading our church. And so as we started kind of talking through this, and we started working on things as a church, just as we were becoming dismayed about the way things were, and how so many Christians were divisive, and how there was this kind of, as many people have said, COVID just accelerated everything. It's not that it changed a lot, it just accelerated, it brought all these things to the forefront. So I started thinking about this, and in fact, one of our friends that helps us in church was just asking me, like, what are some convictions coming out of COVID? And I thought, man, that's a great question. And of course, I love alliteration. So then it was like, okay, here's my COVID convictions, And as a church, and one of the things I've been sharing is there was 3 primary convictions that we had coming out of COVID. And so I can share those quickly. But number 1 coming out, and we're not out of it, but that's come out of this season of COVID, is that the church is God's plan A. That's our first conviction as a church. And the reason why I said it like that is, when we first closed in-person gatherings last year, we did it because, again, we wanted to be, the phrase we used was, we wanted to be a good community partner. We had literally talked to hospital leaders, school leaders, city and state leaders about, hey, we're kind of all in this together. And for the first little while, when lockdowns and shelter in place started, there was this sense of like, hey, we're all in this together. Let's do this together. So when we felt like it was the right thing to do at the time. But one of the things that I have said and learned, that the psychology of closing down in-person gatherings was much easier than the psychology of coming back. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, closing down's easy because it feels like the right thing to do. Right. But then once you do that, it's like, well, by what standard would we come back? Mm-hmm. And I created this whole 4-phase reopening plan, and I thought it was really awesome and great. And you try to create these benchmarks until you realize the goalposts moved all the time. Mm-hmm. It was like 14 days to flatten the curve turned into 14 months to, So it was just such a crazy time where the conviction of man, the gathering of the church is so important, that is God's plan. So it went from, hey, we are doing this because we want to be good community partners, to we now have this conviction to not close our doors again. Mm-hmm. And I told our team when we came back last year, I said, hey, we're going to do everything we can to keep meeting in person, keep gathering in person, because it's so vital. Mm-hmm. Because when we don't have this rhythm of gathering together every week, then we feel so disconnected. We feel so unapart. I mean, it's like not gathering with your family. The church is the family of God. And so again, we still want to be smart, but the conviction was, we're going to do everything we can to not close in-person gatherings again, not because we felt like what we did was wrong or bad, but once it was taken away, we just realized, not that we didn't know it was vital before, but we just understand how vital it is. Because I really feel like, I'm not saying that COVID was from the devil, but he used it to isolate and then separate. Right. And that's where we felt like, as the church, man, we've got to get back together because this is vital. It is God's plan.
How difficult was it to lead through last year?
I mean, it's hard to, I had a sigh there. It's hard to adequately put into words. And I've said this many times too. When we first closed in-person gatherings, I was on it, which may sound weird to say, but I was honestly excited because we talk a lot about living life on mission here. And so I felt like, this is a great opportunity for us to kind of redirect resources, and we're not having to do gatherings right now, but now we can mobilize our people to live life on mission. If we're not gathering together, as the church, then we can scatter as the church, and so we worked really hard for people to live life on mission. And so we were keeping, food pantries at schools stocked. We were helping people. We were serving people, the hospitals, leaders, So for the first few months, I was honestly excited. So that part wasn't hard. But once everything started to kind of shift, even politically and then culturally, and then we moved into another crisis in the summer, then it became crisis upon crisis. And then that's when the reality of like, oh, we're not getting out of this anytime soon. And now the fact that we've all been separated for months, and now these, other crises are happening at the same time. That's when it became really hard to lead. And then to try to reopen, because again, it's by what standards, by whose standards? CDC's, all that stuff changes all the time. It became impossible to make a plan. And part of leadership, and I didn't come up with this idea, but part of leadership is solving problems before other people know that there are problems. That's what we do.
Right.
Well, everybody knew there was problems. And so it became very reactive instead of proactive.
Right.
And that's what made it so hard, is we were just reacting to all these things all the time, which then doesn't allow us to be proactive to do what we do and to get back into rhythm to do what we do. And so that's what made it so hard. It's like you're just playing whack-a-mole all the time, trying to put out all these fires. And that was just exhausting.
When you got to the point of, okay, we've regathered. We regathered a lot quicker than a lot of places.
Yeah.
We regathered in August of 2020. When we got to the point of, okay, we are going to be in this rhythm. We're going to do everything we can. This is one of our convictions coming out of 2020, was to stay in person.
Yes.
And continue to give other options, because we knew people weren't ready.
Of course. Yeah. We had scattered, more spacious services online, all that kind of stuff. We spread out times. Yeah.
When did you feel, and was it when we put the discipleship task force together, when did you feel, okay, we're going to have some momentum coming into 2021?
Well, that really led to the second conviction, to answer your question, when did I feel? So the first one was the church is God's plan A. Like, that is the plan of God, to get the God, to make disciples. And so when you start thinking about, okay, the church is God's plan, well, what is the mission of the church?
Right.
So my second conviction was discipleship is the mission of the church. And so I had this, like a lot of people, I was just dismayed about how Christians were acting. And not just Christians in our church, but also Christians in our church, how they would talk and how they would treat people. And you just realize very quickly, oh my gosh, like all these people that you're doing life with, that you're helping grow, you realize we haven't done a great job, of one of the things I've said is I just realized, and a lot of people realize, that most Christians have been discipled by the world more than they've been discipled by the word. So that's when that conviction really started to say, gosh, we've got to get better at this. And you just mentioned it, but yeah, one of the things we did is I knew this was a problem that we had to work to solve. And so I just didn't know what else. There was a lot of talk about task force at the time. So we put together this discipleship task force of just people on our team, and that were thinking about these things and responsible for a lot of this at the campuses and in adults and that kind of stuff. And so we just started meeting weekly and said, all right, we're going to work on this. We're going to figure out a better discipleship strategy, and looking primarily at the strategy of Jesus. How did he do things?
Right.
And one of the things that I shared that I learned a couple of years ago in our church planning network, because our vision is to multiply. And one of the things research said of why multiplication movements died was that the church didn't have a micro discipleship strategy that the macro of planting churches and campuses was built on. And that's what I realized. Like, if we were ever going to have a multiplication strategy of where we're actually planting churches and campuses, that had to start at a micro level. We had to first multiply disciples and leaders. Because if we never multiplied disciples and leaders, we would never get campuses and churches. So that's where we kind of went back to the drawing board, if you will, and said, okay, how are we going to multiply disciples and leaders? And really reworked our entire discipleship strategy based upon the strategy of Jesus and how he did things, from large groups to medium-sized groups to smaller groups to, all the way, what we have said is like the hundreds, the 72, the 12, and the 3, So we rebuilt our entire discipleship strategy based upon that. And we're just now getting started doing that. Like we've changed our welcome process, so how people get connected on the front end, and now we have changed what our kind of group strategy is, what that looks like, serving on teams. Like we rolled out our entire new T-shirts for our teams with 72 on the sleeve because we understood now people are more willing to join a team before they are to join a group, and so we just looked at all that and said, okay, let's put this strategy together. And we're just getting started in that. So to answer your question about momentum, I feel like it was a need that everybody in the church felt. And again, not just Revolution, I think the broader church, to say, man, we got to do a better job at this. That the church is, and I don't mean this because it bothers me when people are so negative about the church. But being in it, I realize, and a lot of people appropriately realize, hey, the church is, we're not just here to be cool, because I think so often that was the mantra. Like we're just trying to fit in with the culture, to where now we're saying, no, we've got to do a better job of preparing people for the culture, because they're not prepared.
Right. No, that's good. And to paint the picture of this discipleship task force, if you have ever been in the multipurpose room at our Canton location, we met there every Wednesday for hours in the afternoon, starting in January of 2021. So we were still socially distancing. There were 7 people in the room. Everybody sat at a round top that sat 8 people. So one person at a table. And there were these light bulb moments every time we got together where it was like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's how Jesus did it. Or, yeah, that's excellent. The 72 on the sleeve, that people are going to ask, hey, what's the 72 all about? So that brings us to this moment in the life of the church where we have a third conviction, a third conviction that kind of it doesn't tie it up into a bow, because this is a 5 to 10 year plan.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the third one, it kind of brings those two together to say, well, since the church is God's plan A, and God determines that, not us, and he has told us what the mission of the church is, to make disciples, which is what Jesus told us, then the third conviction is, then we're going to invest in the future of the church. We're going to invest in the mission of the church for generations to come. Because the greatest failure we can have as a church is not only did we not accomplish our mission, but then we didn't accomplish our mission, and then the next generation missed it, and so our mission as a church has got to be generational. Like we've got to think generationally, because the gospel is, and I don't say this like it's actually going to happen, because obviously the sovereignty of the Lord, it won't. But I think we have to think the gospel is always one generation from dying out. It's always one generation away from a generation of people not knowing it.
Right.
And we talk a lot about this, Old Testament Jewish history. How many times does the Bible say this generation followed the Lord, but then the next one didn't? And so they just forgot. They didn't remember. And so not only in this cultural moment is it so important for the church to do its mission, to accomplish its mission, but think about where we are right now versus where we will be 20 years from now or 30 years from now. And so if we are concerned about the direction of the world, then the best thing that we can do is invest in the church. And because that's the plan. And I'm not saying it's wrong or bad to invest in politics or any other kind of thing, because those are ordained by God too. But what I'm saying is there's no investment that should get more from us than the church, with our time, with our money, with our resources, because there's nothing that's going to last like the church. Again, we can go biblically. And I mean, you think about the church in Rome and when it first started, the Roman government went away, but the church still exists. And so all of us should care about the direction of our country, and that's good and right. But we should realize that the good of our country comes out of the church, comes out of the impact that the church can make on the people of our country. And so, it was just this conviction of saying, as like Joshua did, as for me and my house, I can say that for my family, but I can also say that as the leader of this church.
Yes.
Say for me and our church, this is what we're going to do. We're going to invest in the mission of the church for generations to come, because there is no other plan. Part of where we are currently is due to failures from church leaders prior to us, not preparing us for these moments. And I think that's where I feel this huge sense of responsibility to say, I don't want the generation coming after us saying, hey, you guys didn't prepare us for this. You didn't prepare us for the onslaught that my faith is taking.
Right.
You didn't teach me how to think about this. You didn't teach me how to handle this. And I just don't want to leave that kind of legacy as a church.
And why are we doing this? We're doing this because every single week we get to see people who have not been in church in over 2 years. They are returning to church.
Yep.
And obviously we want to love everyone where they are.
Of course.
But we want to encourage them to come back.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing a flood of people coming to church for the first time.
Yeah.
Because what they were clinging to prior to COVID fell apart. And God has a unique, that's why I said earlier, I don't think COVID's from the devil. Now that's a bigger theological question we can get into in the future. Not like cilantro from the last episode.
It definitely is from the devil. But when it comes with the problem of pain and human suffering, theologically speaking, God doesn't create that, but he uses that. I mean, we are a result of human pain, a result of human choices, but God is sovereign and in control of that. And he uses those things. And so, just like the Bible talks about with prophecy, again, everybody likes to get into the book of Revelation, which is fine. I think we should. But people like to get into the latter parts of the book where it starts talking about all these events that are going to take place. And they miss the first several chapters of the book, which are the letter to the churches. And it says in there, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. So the reason that is at the beginning of our apocalyptic literature, because that's the point. The point of anything that happens is for people to listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. And he uses persecution to awaken the church. He uses suffering and hard times to awaken the church. And so I 100% feel like that COVID, it can be used by the Lord for the Holy Spirit to speak to us and wake us up and to listen to what the Spirit is saying to us as a church and say, guys, this is not a game that we're playing. This is real, and this has eternal consequences for you, for me, for my kids, for the generations beyond us. So let's quit playing church. And I think that's what happened to a lot of people pre-COVID. They were just playing church.
Yes.
And that's what we're saying now is, no, we're not playing, And again, I'm not saying there's not reasons to watch online or, you may have health reasons, all that kind of stuff. That's fine. But what we're getting at is like, if coming out of COVID is, if the church and the mission of the church isn't more central to our life than it was prior, then we haven't learned what we need to learn. And we have to be cautious and make sure that we don't fall into complacency. Absolutely.
Where, okay, church just becomes something, got to get the kids in church, got to show up to church 1.7 times a month, keep myself on the record books.
Exactly.
That's not where we want to be. And I say this all the time, especially when I'm talking to new stewards in session 3 of our Welcome Track. If you haven't gone through Welcome Track, go to our website, go to our app, click on Welcome Track. The first 2 sessions are online. It gives you the DNA and the culture of who we are as a church, why the church is central in our lives. And then session 3 is in person. And I say this often, I didn't get saved until I was 45. I'm 60 now. I don't have time to play church.
Exactly.
And if you want to play church, this might not be the place for you.
It's definitely not the place for you.
because we're a battleship against a real enemy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that analogy, comes from a guy that we both respect very much so, in John Piper. And he uses that analogy to say a lot of people see the church as a cruise ship. Mm-hmm. Like we're on this journey and it's all fun. But he said, no, we need to see it as a battleship.
That's right.
And I think that is the purpose of why God allowed COVID. Mm-hmm. Is to wake us up to the reality of the spiritual truths that are going on. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, maybe they saw it or knew it before, and they can look at it, things that are happening in politics, things that are happening in the world, and they start getting super concerned about that. And that's good. We should be super concerned about that. But what we can't do is allow that to make us become more cynical about the things that are happening, and it should make us become more dedicated to the solution to combating those things, which is the local church. And so again, it's the mission of the church. That is God's plan. God didn't send a political savior. He didn't send a politician. He sent Jesus, a shepherd, a pastor. Amen. And then Jesus chose 12 guys and they became pastors. And that's what Ephesians 4 tells us, that he appointed them to equip the people for the work of ministry.
Yes.
So yeah, we're not playing games here. And that's the point, is like, we're not the kind of church that's going to just kind of babysit people. Mm-hmm. We want to make it really hard. We don't want to make it hard to follow Jesus here. We want to make that easy, but we want to make it really hard to stay here if you don't want to follow Jesus.
Amen.
Because we don't have time.
That's right.
For that.
That's right. That's right. If you made it through the Christmas quiz to all of the gold of the last 20 minutes, good for you. This is the Grow People podcast. Thank you for sharing just what's on your heart, because the last 22 months have been hard.
Yeah.
And as we get into the next episode later this month, we're going to talk about grief and lamenting and Sabbathing. Mm-hmm. And I do want to ask the question, what was it like to get together with other lead pastors around the country and just talk about trauma that has been experienced in the church over the last 22 months? Because we'll find out next episode that grief is more than the things we know we need to grieve over. Mm-hmm. We know we need to grieve over the loss of family members.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't even do that.
Yeah, exactly.
But there are so many other things that we need to grieve.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll unpack that in the next episode. You have been listening to the Grow People podcast with Pastor Jason. Comments and views expressed on this program are representative of the mission and vision of Revolution Church. And for a transcript of today's podcast, just write down everything we say.
And are we going to say that every time?
We are going to say that every time.
It's part of the jingle.
Well, there are new people coming in all the
That's
time.
True.
If you have a question for Ask Pastor Jason, we don't have time for the Ask Pastor Jason segment today, but if you have a question, please post it on the Instagram page of Revolution Church. It's Revolution Church GA, Revolution Church.
They can send us a message.
They can send us a message, yes. And as always, we end with the best advice we've ever heard. Pastor Jason has said this many times from stage.
Trust God and take a nap.
Amen. We'll see you next time.